This is the award-winning Lee Pitts Live.
Southwest Florida, we're back. Where in Southwest Florida at Lee Pitts Live, we are still enjoying ourselves out here at Bruno and Prado, one of America's great law firms located right here in Fort Myers. And we're so thrilled that we're going to get an opportunity now to talk to one of the attorneys here, Atty. Bruno, who's also the senior legal advisor for Lee Pitts Live. Kathy, thanks for welcoming us out to Bruno and Prado. People have been seeing it and they like, hey, that's cool.
Thank you so much for coming out here and spending some time with us here at Bruno and Prado. We're happy to have you.
Summarize, what is Bruno and Prado?
Bruno and Prado is a law firm that offers various types of legal services. Trisha Prado is the other half of Bruno and Prado, and we have a full staff. We have other individuals that help us in making sure that the community is properly represented.
I noticed all the while that we've been here, people have been really enjoying themselves. The hospitality that you guys laid out for Lee Pitts Live made us feel like we were royalty here.
You're family here.
That's great. Senior legal advisor to Lee Pitts Live, and is that on your resume yet?
Yes, sir. It's on everybody knows.
We love it too. There have been a couple of things that have been hot in the news lately, so we're good to get you in here to kind of summarize a few things. We could get a chance to talk a little bit about small claims court, domestic violence, and dependency. Tell us, let's start off with small claims court.
Okay.
Because I contacted you and said, hey, I had to deal with small claims court, and what the heck is it? But it sounds like a nice little name. What can we expect from small claims court? What is small claims court?
Small claims court is an avenue for individuals to handle minor legal problems. Mm-hmm. The cutoff is about $5,000, and it's a county court that handles it.
Now, do you and law firms like yourselves, do you guys see small claim court as a benefit or competition?
I wouldn't say. I think it's a benefit to the public, because smaller things that sometimes individuals can handle themselves, or maybe with just a little bit of follow-up or some advice, it's beneficial to them. The things where lawyers really roll up their sleeves and that you probably need representation is when you go to circuit court.
I see. Mm-hmm. Now, who should tap into small claims court? What kind of cases you think?
Every case where the damage, what we call the damage, how much money you're looking for, how much money out of pocket, that's $5,000 or less, and that doesn't include costs if you do have an attorney. It doesn't include costs if you have interest to the judgment, those kind of things. But just the bottom line of it is a small claims action. Mm-hmm. So everything from this person needs to return this property to me, to this person sold me a lemon, to this person needs to cut their trees, or what have you. Think of small claims court as Judge Judy's court, or any of those courtroom shows that you see on television.
Now, they're pretty busy, small claims court?
Very busy. Small claims court is a busy court.
So when you decide to go to small claims court, how soon can your case be heard, do you think?
It depends on the jurisdiction. Every jurisdiction has their own timelines. And it depends on the judge who's handling it. Sometimes they make you do pre-trial conference with the judge first. Sometimes the judges send you to mediation before you can even go argue in front of them. So it's hard to tell it based on the jurisdiction.
Now, when I first contacted you and said, hey, I think what's a small claims court issue, and you start laying things out to me, one of the things that stood out in my head is that if the judge rules in your favor, that doesn't mean that small claims court is going to follow that through and make somebody pay you.
No court does that.
What do they do? How does that work?
When you get a judgment where the court says, okay, I agree with you, this person owes you $5,000. They put it down on paper. That paper is called a judgment. You are responsible to collect your judgment. There are different ways to do it. You can try to get a lien on their checks, a lien on their property. There's all kinds of collection actions that can take place. But just because the judge says, yeah, you owed it, and the judge can even say you got to pay within 60 days. Sometimes people don't do that. So there's all kinds of avenues. You can file a motion for contempt. You have to collect the judgment. There's all kinds of ways to do that. So it can get a little complicated.
So that's one of the cons there. Final question on small claims court. Is it best to have a lawyer when you're dealing with small claims court?
It depends on what it is. You do not have to have a lawyer for any legal action. You'd be considered a pro se litigant. If it's a complicated matter, you probably want a lawyer. Sometimes lawyers can avoid small claims courts with a couple of letters, a couple of phone calls, and those kind of things. So it really just depends. But it's always a benefit to get legal advice. The reason is the courts, no matter what kind of court, what kind of law, you are still responsible to know it.
Mm-hmm. Now, most people don't have access to a great lawyer like you and Trisha, like I do. I get the hookup. Now, when people call Bruno and Prado, we have your phone number on the screen. They can get, if they have a particular case, whether it be a marital, family, collaborative board, divorce, Social Security, disability, worker compensation, auto and accident, and personal injury. When they call you guys, if it doesn't fit what you guys do, you guys refer them to somewhere else?
We have a network of trusted attorneys that we've worked with and that we collaborate with. And if it's something that we are not an expertise in, we know where you can go get help.
Adrian Peterson, famous football player, it's been well documented. Minnesota Vikings, he whipped his child and he got suspended in the NFL and all of that. Would that be still considered domestic violence, even though it's a father against his son, as opposed to, like, we think of domestic violence, we think about a man beating up his wife or something like that?
That is domestic violence, a man beating up his wife. Usually cases where there's alleged abuse against a child in our jurisdiction is considered a dependency case, a child abuse neglect case.
Mm-hmm. Now, what are some statistics around that?
In terms of child abuse?
Right.
Well, I didn't pull everything up on child abuse, but I can tell you that child abuse is something that is rampant in our society, particularly because of cultural issues.
Mm-hmm.
It's, for example, when you look at the Ray Rice case, what happened with him is that he was hitting his child with the switch. Mm-hmm. And back in the day,
that would be Adrian Peterson.
I'm sorry.
That's why we got them mixed up.
I'm sorry.
Adrian Peterson is domestic violence.
I'm sorry. So basically what happens is, in that particular case, he was hitting his child with a switch, etc. So sometimes we have cultural issues that need to be addressed. Sometimes they're just parenting skills, and we change our parenting styles over time, whether or not you can spank a child, whether or not you can't. Those are all issues that evolve over time. So that's why it's so important to know your rights.
What is DCF and what's their role in this?
The Department of Children and Families is responsible for investigating child abuse cases. The department has various levels in that investigation. The first thing is, like, if somebody calls the hotline and says, hey, I know a child who's being abused, the community does need to know that there are mandatory reporters. Mm-hmm. So if you go to the doctor's office, if you go to a teacher at school, etc., they're considered mandatory reporters. They must call the hotline. An abuse case is called in, they have to go out there and investigate. They have investigators that go and investigate. If they don't see anything, everything is closed. They'll send you a letter after so long that says we didn't have any findings, or there were findings but it was minor, it's addressed, etc. Then you have different layers where at this point they're trying to focus on the family and help the family. So you can go, DCF can sit there and say, okay, let's come up with a plan on how to help this family. Now, in the more egregious situation, this is when DCF goes out there. If you remember, not too long ago, there was a case where little toddlers were outside in a trailer park. Well, those type of cases, DCF will actually go out there and immediately petition the court. It's what it's called a shelter petition, to take those kids immediately from the family.
I see.
So there's different levels.
How does the courts get involved?
As soon as the shelter petition is filed, then basically at that point in our jurisdiction, Judge Lee Schreiber takes over. Mm-hmm. And she starts to dish out what's going to happen and what's not going to happen. And the parents do have an opportunity to try to work on what they call a case plan, to come up with ways to improve their situation so they can get their kids back. If they can't, then the parents' rights are terminated, adoption, guardian placement, hopefully a relative placement is found for them.
Now, is the bottom line now that guardians or parents cannot whip their children?
No. In Florida, you cannot leave a mark on your child. So hitting with a switch is going to leave a mark. Hitting with a belt is going to leave a mark. The best thing to do is, if you believe in corporal punishment, you can spank your child on the bottom, so long as it's not hard enough that's leaving a mark.
With your hand.
With your hand.
Oh,
you
come
cannot
on, man.
use objects. No objects.
My mom used to-
nothing like no hitting in the face. Those are all kinds of things that people get in trouble with.
And we know black folk in particular, don't get mad at me, and just the truth, particularly back in the day, our parents used to really get us.
Yep.
Those days are gone.
That's why I was talking about the cultural issues.
Right.
We're still facing those cultural issues. You can't do it. You do it, the child goes to school with marks on their body, teacher is a mandatory reporter, doctor is a mandatory reporter. And then you find yourself in a situation that you don't want to be in, and then you call me, and then I have to get you out of it.
Okay. Bottom line, before I switch out of that particular conversation, is I'm glad my mom whooped my butt. That's it. Okay.
I agree. You got to have good discipline.
Okay. Ray Rice, domestic violence.
Yes.
We hit it a little bit though. How can you protect yourself in domestic violence situation, male or female?
You need to come up with a safety plan. You need to figure out how are you going to be able to safely get away from the situation. We do have an ACT shelter here that you can call and they can give you advice. Otherwise, you can go to your doctor, your pastor, your friend, your lawyer, whoever it is that you trust to try to come up with a safety plan.
And when should you get the courts involved in that case, and how do they get involved?
You go down to the courthouse, you request what we term, it's called a petition for injunction, but it's a restraining order, and you have to, there's certain laws that apply to that. It has to be somebody that you've lived with, somebody that you've dated, husband, wife. There's certain criteria, but that's the best way to do it.
What's an injunction? Sesame Street that for me.
That's a restraining order. That's when you go in front of the court, you file a petition. Within 2 weeks, you will have a hearing on that petition. If the initial one is granted, that initial one, there's no court hearing. It's ex parte, which means you're just talking to the judge. The other side doesn't have a chance to talk. 2 weeks, everybody comes in and talks. And if the judge feels that there's enough grounds, that there's enough violations, assault, battery, false imprisonment, those kind of things, then at that point, the judge will give you an injunction. That person stays away.
I see. Now, we mentioned 2 high-profile cases with Ray Rice and with Adrian Peterson, NFL guys. As an attorney sitting back looking at this play out on television in the grand scope that it played out in, what do you think that did in terms of educating people about their rights and things like that?
I hope it educated people. This is a very serious situation. You have parents who don't know what their rights are. Just because DCF comes in does not necessarily mean that you have to talk to them, does not necessarily mean that you have to follow. You do have rights to be able to argue and discuss, but at the same token, you need to know what you can and can't do with your children. Same with domestic violence. It's an epidemic. Domestic violence is an epidemic. Men and women, over 3 million men are assaulted. Over 4 million women, 1 in 4 women are going to be assaulted. So it's a very, very serious situation, especially for our high school and college age people. So it's really, really important that we keep vigilant and that we teach our daughters particularly, as well as our sons, how to protect themselves.
Well, Kathy, it's always a pleasure getting that information from you. You keep us on point. Let's bump you out here.
Love having you.
Okay. It's the saying goes on this particular show, for those who say it can't be done, they're usually interrupted by those like Kathy Bruno, of Bruno and Prado, also the senior legal advisor for Lee Pitts Live. We're doing it. When we come back, Chef Michelle, right here, the celebrity chef.